Hello there, I'm Randy Skretvet. I'm the author of Laurel and Hardy, The Magic Behind the Movies, and we are watching We Faw Down, which was filmed Thursday, August 23rd through Friday, August 31st of 1928. Retakes and new scenes were shot on September 7th and 13th, and the film was copyrighted and released on December 29th of 1928. The soundtrack, something new, was recorded on the evening of Friday, October 26, 1928, by the Victor Talking Machine Company at the Camden Trinity Baptist Church at 114 North 5th Street in Camden, New Jersey. Joseph Pasternak led the orchestra of 27 men, and if you want to know what was filmed when or the names of the musicians, well, that's in Laurel and Hardy, The Magic Behind the Movies. The opening theme, by the way, is That's My Weakness Now. And this is the first of only 3 films officially directed by Leo McCarey. Wrong Again and Liberty are the 2 other credited films, although James Horn directed much of Liberty, and I suspect that McCarey directed much of Putting Pants on Philip and Early to Bed. Now, the story of this film is a lot like a 1914 Keystone comedy called Ambrose's First Falsehood. And in that one, rotund Max Swain tells his wife that he's going to San Francisco on the train when he's really going to a bar run by Edgar Kennedy with his pal Charles Parrott, later known as Charlie Chase. He comes to grief when the newspapers report that the train has crashed, killing everyone aboard. And since this film had Parrott and Kennedy in its cast and was directed by former Roach supervisor F. Richard Jones, one wonders if one of those participants suggested the story. Now, this thing about they're holding up the poker game, there is going to be a very similar situation like this in the later Laurel and Hardy talkie, Be Big. And there is the first sound effect in a Laurel and Hardy film, the telephone ringing. This is evidently Stan's house because he's the one who goes to answer the phone. You saw there the blonde Vivian Oakland. She had briefly played Stan's wife in Love 'Em and Weep, and she would later have significant roles in That's My Wife, Scram, and Way Out West. Born in San Francisco as Vivian Ruth Anderson on May 20th, 1895, she was in vaudeville from childhood, and she made her film debut in 1915. She married actor John T. Murray in 1917, and that year made her Broadway debut in a musical revue called Over the Top. And she was on The Great White Way regularly through 1922, but by 1924 had settled in Hollywood. She began working for the Roach Studio late in 1925, and she was a particular favorite of Charlie Chase in films such as Mighty Like a Moose. Now, this bit about Boss, this is going to be something used again in Their First Mistake. And the trombone effect is very effective. It really adds a lot to this particular scene. There you also see Bess Flowers, who is beloved by movie buffs for her work as an extra in close to 1,100 films, 15 of them for Hal Roach. Now, in any major studio film from the mid-1930s through the early 60s, if there is a crowd of well-to-do people, chances are very good that she will be among them. And she was particularly noticeable after the mid-1940s when her hair turned a distinctive silver. She had larger roles in Three Stooges comedies such as Tassels in the Air and A Plumbing We Will Go. She's also notable in The Awful Truth, where she's a friend of Cary Grant. And when TV came in, she was a party guest, an audience member, a courtroom spectator, or a department store customer in dozens of shows. She was born in Sherman, Texas on November 23, 1898, and she died at 85 at the Motion Picture Country House on July 28, 1984. And there, Ollie takes a tumble. We also see that backdrop, supposed to be the house across the street. We see that in a lot of different Hal Roach films. The music during that scene, by the way, was called Cheatin' on Me. A lot of the tunes used in the score make an ironic commentary on the action. Now we're going to see One Round Kelly, and there is an ad for Union Leader pipe and cigarette tobacco for those of you who like to roll their own. Its quality appeals to all 5 senses. Okay. Well, here we have Vera White and Kay DeLise. And the wind just blew, or the fan just blew Kay's hat into the street. You also see the Harry H. Culver and Company building in the background, which we saw prominently in Leave 'Em Laughing, and before that in Putting Pants on Philip. And before long, you're going to see a street sweeper. I think in the photo gallery, I have an entry from the 1928 date book, which shows when they rented the street sweeper and how much they paid for it. Also in the background, you see the Carl A. Jensen Company there. Jensen was a real estate developer, and he was a close associate of Harry Culver. Died of a heart attack at 48 on December 22nd, 1934. And before long, we're going to have a montage, something very unusual for a Laurel and Hardy film. The only other one that I can think of is early in Blockheads, which shows the change between 1918 and 1938. But now we're going to have an interesting montage showing a fire. There's the horse-drawn fire engine. Now, this is all about the Los Angeles Orpheum Theater supposedly burning down. Well, happily, the Los Angeles Orpheum Theater is still standing. It is beautifully renovated, and it is still presenting concerts frequently at 842 South Broadway in downtown Los Angeles. It opened on February 15th, 1926, so it was only 2.5 years old when We Faw Down was filmed. And in fact, you can go to the website. There's an Orpheum Theater website which has some interesting history. Now, here we are in the girls' apartment with beer. Now, remember, this is during Prohibition. So the wasting of beer, as Stan is doing by pouring it into Ollie's lap, is especially irksome, and I'm sure there were many groans in the audiences of 1928. Kay, before long, is going to indicate that she wants to make whoopee with Stan. And by the way, the blonde girl, that's Kay DeLise. Now, we saw her before in Their Purple Moment as another good time girl, and we saw her in Should Married Men Go Home in a very different role as Ollie's prim and proper wife. Now, before this, she had appeared in Chaplin's The Gold Rush and also several Charlie Chase shorts. She would have more prominent roles with Stan and Ollie in Perfect Day and Below Zero. She finished her 60-plus film career in 1952 with a bit as a shooting gallery proprietor in the Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn movie Pat and Mike. She was born as Kathleen M. Herbert on September 28, 1899 in London, and she died at 74 on August 15, 1974 in West Covina, California. And the little brunette is Vera White, and she was from Melbourne, Australia, born there as Harriet Vera White on September 13, 1893. In 1913, she married an acrobatic dancer named Joseph T. Everett, and they toured Australia, New Zealand, and the States as Joe and Vera White, the vaudeville chop suey. Vera began making movies in October 1918. She divorced Joe in 1922. She was very busy at the Roach Lot in the early 20s, appearing in films with Harold Lloyd, his brother Gaylord, Will Rogers, Snub Pollard, and Stan Laurel in a film called Wide Open Spaces. Vera also made films for other comedy studios, including Chadwick and Weiss Brothers Art Class. And after We Faw Down, she made 2 shorts for Al Christie. 2 months after working with Stan and Babe on this film, in October 1928, she was injured in an automobile accident and mostly retired from movie work, although she does show up as an extra in Laurel and Hardy's 1938 feature Swiss Miss. And she died at 56 on November 11th, 1949. Now, there's this Be Bohemian and Make Whoopee. This is very much a film of the Roaring Twenties, as is Their Purple Moment. It has a very casual attitude toward marriage, fidelity, responsibility, and alcohol. And just as One Good Turn is very much a film of the early 30s with Laurel and Hardy as victims of the Depression, and Jitterbugs with the mechanical swing band is of the 40s, and Atoll K with its plot about uranium, which is used to make various nuclear nasties, is of the 1950s. You're going to hear a voice for Ollie laughing, and the man is Bradley Barker, a very busy film actor and director from 1915 through 1930. He was 45 years old at the time We Faw Down was made. He went from silent movies into radio, where appropriately for someone named Barker, he became an animal imitator on shows such as Little Orphan Annie and Let's Pretend. He also provided the first screen roar of Leo the Lion, a roar, not a bark. So, kind of interesting. Well, also we have some interesting music. During the scratching of the hair music, there was a tune called Whoopee. And the lady who was doing the laughing for Kay, the first human voice in a Laurel and Hardy movie, she's identified in the Victor Ledgers only as Miss Sharkey. So we don't know Miss Sharkey's first name. Now, the title of this film was a coy expression prevalent in America in the late 1920s, probably inspired by a popular song of the time called I Faw Down and Go Boom, written by James Brockman and Leonard Stevens. Eddie Cantor, Annette Hanshaw, and the bands of George Olson and Harry Reeser all made records of the tune, and we saw Faw Down in titles for From Soup to Nuts. Now, in England, the phrase was not well known, so this film's title was changed to We Slip Up. And I Faw Down and Go Boom was probably also the inspiration for the title of the 1929 short, They Go Boom. Now, Kay gets pushed off the chair repeatedly. Leo McCarey liked scenes to go on and on very, very long, and this one does. But what's interesting is Kay doesn't mind at all the physical abuse, but just wait now until Stan makes his criticism, she's too fat. Well, pushing her to the floor is no problem, but call her fat and she gets riled. Now, there was originally a very brief scene right here with Edgar Kennedy as a man who lives in the apartment across the hall, and he's angry because he's trying to sleep. Now, you can read the cutting continuity of that in the photo gallery. If that was ever released, it doesn't exist today because it was likely removed to tighten the pacing. Here's One Round Kelly. Now, he was not Irish, he was Greek. His name was George Katsaneras. Born in Naupli, Greece on October 16, 1892, educated in Athens. He had been a wrestler, which is evident from his nose. He appeared in 18 films between 1926 and 1931, usually as convicts, fighters, and other tough guys. He's Baldy in William Wellman's 1928 film Beggars of Life, starring Wallace Beery and Louise Brooks. He may have been hampered in talkies by an accent because he returned to wrestling when he was in his late 30s. And on June 13, 1933, he was driving with a fellow wrestler in Eutaw, Alabama, en route to a bout in Nashville when he fell asleep at the wheel, and unfortunately his car skidded and overturned, ending his colorful life at 40. This scene right here, originally, we'll obviously hear Laurel and Hardy coming out of a window, literally with their pants down, with a woman inside the room. Well, this implies behavior that the wives would find very, very improper. And, of course, having to alibi to the wives when the women know that they're lying, that's going to show up again in Sons of the Desert. Ollie will sense that something is wrong when he sees Vivian's stern visage, and the music underneath that scene is Somebody's Wrong. Before this sequence, there was, in the script, a whole bunch of gags where Laurel and Hardy realize that they have each other's pants on. And so they try to change trousers in many different areas. They're inside a taxi and by a fish market where Stan happens to acquire a crab in his trousers. Well, if those scenes sound familiar, they should, because they are in the Laurel and Hardy movie Liberty. And what happened was they had all those scenes for this film, but unfortunately, they could not have all that great stuff and then resolve the story in time for 20 minutes. They would wind up with a three-reeler. And at this point, Roach was not making three-reel comedies yet. So they said, well, the only thing we can cut is all the changing the pants stuff, which is actually the funniest stuff in the movie. So rather than just scrap that entirely, what they did is they built their next movie around the changing the pants sequence. And in fact, there's somebody on YouTube who has reinstated that footage into We Faw Down. It's kind of interesting to see it put back into where it normally belonged. But if you look at Liberty, you will see that they're wearing the same suits and ties that they wear here in We Faw Down. Now, during the first 3 days when We Faw Down was filmed, the Orpheum Theater was on Broadway at 9th, and it was presenting Adele Rowland and Frank Keenan, two Los Angeles favorites in entirely new acts. Adele was in Songs Old and New, while character actor Frank Keenan was in a playlet called The Second Performance. Also, Tillis and LaRue in a lavishly staged offering called Dance-A-Log with the Four Roses, and a musical farce starring Tommy Mann called The College Flirt. Charles Slim Timblin and Company were in Southern Capers, and Roy Rogers, not the Roy Rogers that we know, was in something called Show Me the Way Home. Also, Ted and Al Waldman and Lorimer and Hudson, and other Keith Orpheum features. There were 2 shows daily, all seats reserved. Afternoon shows were 25 cents to 75 cents. Evenings were 50 cents to $1.50, and the entire balcony every night except Sunday was 50 cents. That's what was really playing at the Orpheum during the first few days of the filming of this movie. Now, on the 26th, the bill changed to actress Jean Eagles, who was mesmerizing in her one talkie film, The Letter. She appeared in scenes from Her Cardboard Lover and Rain, and the supporting program was Florrie Levere with Lou Handeman, Shaw and Carroll, once again Charles Slim Timblin, and other features. What's interesting, though, is that same week, the Hill Street Theater nearby in Los Angeles was presenting a movie called The Red Mark, and supporting this was a special appearance by the Our Gang Kids, making a stage appearance. My goodness gracious. Now, by the way, if you look during this sequence, the sheet music on the piano behind Ollie changes. It changes position. So evidently something in this scene was a retake. Now, they shot most of this film, again, from August 23rd through the 31st, but they did retakes on September 7th and 13th. Also, I don't know if you saw it, Stan, when he was calling Babe's attention to the cards, he said, "Babe." There's also going to be another sound effect of Stan blowing his nose. And this whole scene, it's interesting because it's based on the misinterpretation of mime. Stan is not quite the innocent yet that he would become starting around 1930. You know, those characters continued to develop. And in the late 20s, I think Jack McCabe said in Mr. Laurel and Mr. Hardy, you know, in the silent films, Laurel and Hardy are just a couple of dumb guys, but the childlike aspect of their personalities really took hold during the first years of the talkies. And now we have the hula dance, and during the hula scene we have the music Aloha Oi. And before long, Stan is going to read the headline with the awful news, and just as in Sons of the Desert, when they see the headline about the Honolulu liner sinking, it's going to take a little while for this to sink in, for Stan to realize what to do. And yes, here we go. And this is another Leo McCarey scene. Leo really liked scenes that go on for a long time, particularly scenes that do illustrate the personality of the character. So he's to be credited for that. And of course, Leo McCarey is to be credited for being the guy who went into Hal Roach's office and said, "Hey, why don't we develop a series around these two guys?" So if it hadn't been for Leo McCarey, we might never have had Laurel and Hardy as a dedicated team. Now Vivian is fuming, and there's before long going to be another long close-up of Ollie when he realizes that the jig is up. And there's the nose, the nose and the eyebrow. I think that shows up, or at least the bit with the Adam's apple and sticking the tongue out. I think that was borrowed by the Three Stooges in the film Three Little Pigskins. Now Stan realizes the awful truth. And there's going to be a lengthy close-up. And of course, Mr. Hardy had a very, very expressive face. I think he's really, along with Spencer Tracy, I think Oliver Hardy may be the finest film actor of the 1920s, 30s, and early 40s. He really is just a magnificent actor. And there is Vivian fuming once again. And this lengthy close-up of Ollie, another McCarey trademark. Now, Ollie's going to say, "It's a good thing we went to the palace." And the music underneath that is a song called "That's a Lot of Bunk," which is the type of song that you would only find in the late 1920s, which of course was the era of wonderful nonsense. As it turns out, the palace is right next to the Orpheum, or right nearby, and the palace is also still around and has been renovated, and it's also still presenting live shows at 630 South Broadway. But ironically, in 1928, the palace was a movie house. So if they had gone to the palace when this film was made, they wouldn't have seen a vaudeville bill. The laugh for Stan is the same guy who laughed for Ollie. And of course, it doesn't sound like either one of them. It's still Mr. Barker doing the laugh for both of the boys. They should have gotten another guy. I guess there's no scene where both of them laugh at the same time. But I think Stan has pretty much thrown in the towel. I could have thought of a better one than that. I think he's pretty much admitting that all of this is just a big charade. Now, before long, you're going to see a final gag, a very elaborate final gag. And Leo McCarey talked about this in 1968 to Peter Bogdanovich. And he said, "Before I shot this scene, I didn't want anybody to get hurt, and we had stuntmen jumping from the second floor." And he said, "Through a megaphone, I explained to everybody that we had to get it right the first time. There would only be one take on account of the danger of injury. Everybody listened attentively, and I said, when you jump out of the windows in various states of undress, you run away from the camera and disappear in the alley in back. Everybody said they understood. So, came the big moment. I started the camera and called Stan and Babe. They came running in, the wives followed 15 or 20 paces back, And as they were going down between the buildings, the wives fired at them. The men all jumped out the window. Everything's going great. And one foul-up jumped out the window, pulling on his pants, came running toward the camera, and disappeared on the street side right next to the camera. And I bawled him out. I said, "What the hell do you mean by spoiling this scene? Didn't you hear what I said?" The fellow said, "Hell no, I'm not in this picture." Now, that may be just an apocryphal story, but anyway, here is that shot that Leo McCarey talked about, and you will see not only one but two guys that run toward the camera, so maybe they both were not involved in the shooting of this scene. However, as all those gentlemen run and pull on their trousers, this is Randy Skretvet, and we are saying a fond farewell to We Faw Down, and I thank you very, very much for listening.